Hello, and thank you for joining us for the final day of Architizer's Future Fest. To those of you who have attended our previous talks, welcome back. And if this is the first event that you're joining, also the last one of the 3 weeks, thank you for joining us. Future Fest has been a truly spectacular celebration of architectural innovation and the perfect way to warm up for the 11th annual A+ Awards, which open for entries on October 17th of this year. Stay tuned for more details on that later on. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah Finiak. I'm the architecture editor at Architizer. Today, I am thrilled to have the opportunity to welcome Wandile Mthiyane and Architizer's own Paul Keskeys to the stage as they put forward some weird, wonderful, bold, and brave predictions for the future of architecture. While we wait for the room to fill up, I want to encourage you all to say hi in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Usually we ask you guys to let us know where you're from, but today we'll also add a special twist on this. If you want to give us one prediction for the future of architecture, where you see it going, we'd be interested to read on those, potentially comment on them later on. So you can feel free to write that at any point, but also as an intro. And before we start the talk, I want to give a few quick pointers for our live platform. These may be very familiar to some of you guys by now. If you're having any technical difficulties with the stream, you can always click on the help icon in the bottom lower left corner of the screen. There you'll see a few options for improving your picture, the sound, and so on. It's also worth noting that there will be a recorded version of the talk, so you can catch up on anything that you missed or share this with a colleague after the event. Thirdly, questions. You can type anything that you like in the chat, but if you have a specific question that you'd like to ask, we recommend that you use the questions tab, which is also found in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, right below the chat box next to the chat icon. You can also flip through the questions that other people are asking and upvote the ones that you most want to hear the answers to. Finally, feel free to use the React button, which you'll find in the kind of toolbar at the center, the lower center portion of the screen. And you can use that to react when you see something you like. While this is our final day of Future Fest, it is also possible to watch any of the events from the past 3 weeks on demand. Simply go to architizer.com and click on the top article there, where you can learn more about each talk and register to watch the recordings of those that interest you the most. My colleague Lucia will also drop a link to that article in the chat at some point later on. And now, I am thrilled to announce our panelists for today's chat. Firstly, I want to introduce Wandile Mthiyane, who is an Obama leader, a dynamic speaker, a political analyst, an adjunct professor, and an architect who holds a master's in architecture from Andrews University in Michigan. He's a Resolution Fellow, one Young World Ambassador, and the CEO of a social impact architecture firm, Ubuntu Design Group, the Anti-Racist Hot Dog, and Ubuntu Architecture Summer Abroad Design Justice School. He's also our newest A+ Awards juror for the upcoming season. So wow, what a CV Wandile has. Secondly, Paul Keskeys, who many of you are already familiar with, is Architizer's editor-in-chief. As an architect-trained editor, writer, and content creator, Paul graduated from UCL and the University of Edinburgh, gaining an MArch in architectural design with distinction. Paul has spoken about the art of architecture and storytelling at many national industry events, including AIANY, NeoCon, KBIS, the Future of Now Symposium, the Young Architect Conference, and NYC Tense Design, as well as at hundreds of editorial publications on Architizer. Paul has also written features that were published in Architectural Digest, Pinup Magazine, Archconnect, Aesthetica Magazine, and Public Journal. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Paul for our first predictions. And just a reminder to everyone again, please, please, please send us your predictions for the future of architecture in the chat.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's so strange to have you introducing me for a change, but it's great. I'm so happy to be able to join as a guest speaker on this occasion. First of all, I just wanted to send out a huge thank you to everyone who has attended and participated in our first ever Future Fest. From a personal perspective, I've never been more inspired nor felt more connected to our community as I have over the past 3 weeks. And I appreciate everyone's comments in the chat, your great questions, and the feedback for each event that we've held. The live format has proven itself to be an incredibly powerful way to learn about the world's best architecture. So we'll be conjuring up many more events like these over the coming months, so stay tuned. Okay, so my 3 predictions begin with an amazing image produced by architect Vincent Calbo, who envisaged a remarkably green vision of Paris in 2050. I'm not suggesting that this rendering will literally come true, but I do believe that we'll see an increase in urban farming initiatives as new advancements in agricultural technology intersect with our collective desire to localize food production and reduce our carbon footprint. While the push for more sustainable forms of architecture is nothing new, I do predict that a cultural shift spurred by millennial and Gen Z populations who have grown up with climate change at the forefront of their lives will accelerate the demand for more ethical and localized methods of food procurement in cities. This in turn should hopefully lead this type of architecture to be more marketable and therefore spur innovation in this emerging typology. So as a first example, I present to you the Farmhouse by Studio Precht. It's one of my favorite firms of all time. It may look small and humble in this first image, but check out how it can evolve. This A+ award-winning concept is a fully modular structure that can expand as needed to accommodate its users, steadily rising to form an epic vertical farm on the scale of a skyscraper. One of my favorite aspects of this project is the mixed-use program. Precht proposes a market at the foot of the tower in which residents can sell and buy each other's fruit and vegetables, thereby creating this amazing circular economy with a single building. Now, moving across the world, we have Thammasat University Urban Rooftop Farm by Land Process, and this is a built example. As this amazing architecture firm behind this project states, the climate crisis has increased food and water scarcity across the globe and poses a tremendous threat to human civilization. To prioritize global food security and the health of our people and the environment, Land Process believes cities must utilize neglected spaces to efficiently and sustainably produce food. Now, they've done just this by repurposing almost 250,000 square feet of wasted rooftop space to create the Thammasat University Rooftop Farm. It's called TURF for short. This is now Asia's largest organic rooftop farm. Harnessing the ingenuity of traditional rice terraces, the project incorporates sustainable food production, renewable energy, organic waste, water management, and public space. Combining age-old farming techniques with modern green roof technology, the cascading rooftop absorbs, filters, and slows down runoff 20 times more efficiently than conventional concrete rooftops. As rainwater zigzags down the slopes, turf grows food to feed the campus. The roof is equipped with solar panels capable of producing up to 500,000 watts per hour to irrigate the urban farm and power the building beneath it. This project is a realistic but hopeful solution to the food crisis, putting urban dwellers back in tune with agricultural practices. Lessons on Thai agriculture, landscape, and native soil are embedded in the project, educating future leaders to adapt to and embrace climate challenges for generations to come. You can check out this project on Architizer's website if you want to see more images. They're incredible diagrams and amazing details as well. So my next prediction number 2, involves a topic that has come up a number of times over the last 3 weeks, 3D printing. Now, I'm sure most of you in the audience are familiar with the idea of 3D printing in architecture. And for a number of years, it's been primarily associated with experimental, rough around the edges concept designs, with many, including Architizer, questioning whether it can truly be used as a practical, everyday construction method. While that is still an open question, certain A+ award-winning projects from the past year have convinced me that 3D printing can and should be a part of the future of architecture. For evidence, look no further than the work of Zaha Hadid Architects' in-house laboratory, ZHA Code. Some of you may have seen this amazing project earlier on in FutureFest on day 9, when ZHA's Shajay Bhushan presented his team's cutting-edge work on the Stratus 3D printed bridge, which combined parametric design, classical geometry, and an incredibly precise robot to produce a pedestrian bridge that minimizes structural materials, speeds up fabrication time, and results in this undeniably elegant structure. Now, you might be thinking, sure, that's amazing, but it's still an experimental structure. And you'd have a point. So I wanted to also show another A+ award winner from last year, which is more of a conventional residential project, but is no less remarkable. House Zero is located in Austin, Texas, and was designed by Lake Flato Architects, another of my favorite firms, and Icon, a company specializing in 3D printed construction. It won 2 A+ awards last year, including Architecture Plus Experimental Design and Architecture Plus New Technology. Featuring an energy-efficient design, House Zero was designed to push the boundaries of what is possible with architecture through automated construction. I'm going to play a quick video now to give you a quick tour around the inside. Awesome. Okay, so this 2,000 square foot residence contains 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms, as well as a 350 square foot 1 bed, 1 bath accessory dwelling unit. As you can see, it features Icon's resilient 3D printed wall system, replacing a building system traditionally made up of multiple steps and therefore saving time, waste, and cost. The walls of the home are made with a proprietary material dubbed Lavacrete, with some steel for reinforcing. Lavacrete provides thermal mass that slows heat transfer into the home, and the combination of thermal mass, increased insulation, and an airtight wall increases the energy efficiency and reduces life cycle costs. Most of all, though, I just want to point out how incredibly beautiful these interiors are. I would happily have bare Lavacrete walls inside my house if they always looked like this. Okay, so speaking of interesting materials, my third prediction is all about them. I believe that in the near future, mushrooms will invade New York and take over civilization. I'm just kidding. But I do believe that bio-based materials have a big future in architecture. One of my favorite A+ award finalists from last year was the Exploded View installation by Bio-Based Creations. This is an exhibition in the shape of a full-size home that is made entirely of bio-based materials, circular construction methods, and stories about the changing value chain of which it is part. People are invited to move through, touch, feel, and smell the future of living, as this storytelling installation teaches you about more than 100 bio-based materials and demonstrates that a lot of bio-based construction is already possible, affordable, and manageable with our current technology. Here are a few of the amazing materials they used to construct this house. In the top left, there are these beautiful blue-green tiles that are actually composed of the residue from sewage. Yes, sewage, which is combined with algae to give it this stunning color. I'm assured that it doesn't smell of anything and it's very clean at this point. In the top right, you can see these stylish hexagonal tiles, which are made from mycelium, otherwise known as mushroom. In the bottom right, this translucent screen is made from bio-waste material and also uses algae for color. And then finally, in the bottom left is probably my favorite material of all in this house. Every surface of this room is made from organic material, and the wall finish on the left is created using the husks of Mexican corn. It used to be the case that only the yellow corn was kept and everything else was thrown away. But a local artist developed a process for repurposing every corn variation and turning it into this amazing wallpaper. The range of colors is wonderful, and it's also helped boost the economy of local farmers in Mexico, as they now have an additional market for their corn. And so that's another one I encourage everyone to check out on the Architizer website. That concludes my first 3 predictions. I'm going to hand over the mic to Wandile. Wandile, would you like me to play your video first? I know you have one coming up.
Yeah, maybe just before playing the video, I want to react to some of the things you've been sharing. Beautiful, amazing. Sure. I have a question actually before getting to my presentation. There's a famous saying in architecture where they say architecture is frozen music. I'm not sure if you've heard that.
I've heard that one.
You've heard that one, yeah. I have sat in many panels and heard this, right, and nodded as if I understand what it means. So I just wanted to publicly ask, what are they saying when they say architecture is frozen music? How do you understand it to be? And also in the comments, please share with us what are your thoughts on this?
You know, it's a great question. I think maybe it applies to certain very fluid kind of organic forms of architecture more than others. And there's something about the golden ratio where, you know, it applies to form as well as musical harmonies. But honestly, I probably have no idea, the same as you. That said, I do like it.
Someone said, yeah, architecture is frozen with mushrooms. I like that. I like that. No, I wanted to ask this question in one of the largest stages in architecture to see that if I'm the only one who's not getting this. But hey, man, please go ahead and play that video.
I'm standing here in the metaverse. It's essentially a bunch of virtual worlds where you can walk around as a digital avatar, talk to other people, play games, and buy and sell things. Now, before you stop watching, I just want to say that I feel the same way as you. What the hell is this? Is it even real? And should we be doing anything about it? Well, it's already getting pretty serious. Right now, people are spending millions in real-life money to reserve digital plots of land, office space and apartments. And huge names like Zaha Hadid Architects and Manchester City Football Club are exploring the possibilities of design in the metaverse. Yes, really. It's a space where we're no longer restrained by things like, you know, gravity, the principles of engineering, or securing enough money to go ahead with a building project.
For me, it's not an escape into fantasy world and into video game-like experiences, but a direct continuity with social reality.
So what does all this mean for the world of architecture and construction? Is the metaverse really going to end up being a thing? What could we build without the limits of construction here on Earth? And how might that impact the way we create our physical world in the future?
Big tech, big brands, big ambitions.
And the metaverse is the next frontier.
If you're listening and that was a little bit over your head, don't worry, because I'm right there with you.
I think it's a good sign to cut it when you start seeing Mark Zuckerberg. You know what I mean? Just like, okay, that's where the video ends. Yeah, so as you may have guessed, I think that the future of architecture is Wakanda. How many of you, how many of you have seen the Black Panther film, right? So Wakanda is this fictional African world where basically like every African culture is part of this culture in terms of the architecture, how they dress, and all of these things create this futuristic. There's something called vibranium, which is what they draw power from, and it's a beautiful society and city. It's not realistic because when you actually watch the movie, there's like something that's Zulu, that's closer, something from South Africa, something from Kenya, something from all over the world, right? So it's not necessarily rooted in actual reality of what has happened, but it is rooted in the reality that people choose to create. And I think that's the future of architecture. Unlike the current spaces and places that we live in, which were predominantly designed by white male, whether you're looking at Rome or London and all of these cities where only white males were architects at the time, or even you're looking at Cape Town. I saw someone from Cape Town there, or Durban, these colonial cities which were built and designed from a position of power. Like for example, when you see an Edwardian building in South Africa or a colonial building in South America, it represents a symbol of dominance. It represents a symbol of power in a sense. Like when folks see that in their places, it's almost like, who's your daddy? Like who once ruled you or still has power over you in the world? And architecture has been used as this huge symbol to oppress. But what the metaverse does is it creates a space and a place where we all then get to sort of imagine the future that we want to see, right? We live in a global world. That's why I love Wakanda, even though it's not rooted in reality. But since we live in this global world, what if we borrowed something from the Khoisans, and then something from the Zulus, and then something from the Xhosas, and then something from Tanzania, etc., and all of these cultures coming together to create these futuristic cities. Now, what's important about these cities and these spaces and these places is that it's not just because, oh, now we're going to have all these interesting looking cities that look exactly like this, but the same way films have shaped what has gone on to happen in architecture, the same way books have shaped on what has gone on to happen in architecture, I think the metaverse starts creating an equity baseline on design where the contributors to this particular world are diverse. It's women, it's people of color, it's folks within a particular dominant group in that particular culture and different places. And I think the melting pot of all of these ideas coming together online will help us realize how much we've actually been missing out from actually the diversity of ideas and concepts, that the world could look a lot better if we shaped it together rather than continuing to recycle what was done in Rome and all these different places. So I also have a quote here by an anonymous person, like, the architectural profession can face this new condition as an increasingly relevant, resistant realm, insisting on materiality and practicing a nostalgic, modernistic revivalism while potential clients vote with their feet. So the idea is that, like, the world of architecture sometimes can be very stubborn and very conservative. And they can insist in keeping things the way they are, or we can open our eyes to this new reality and sort of it's sort of like a potluck where we're all bringing our own different dishes to create a world where we all belong and where we all can thrive. So prediction number one, the future of architecture is Wakanda forever. Can you please play that video? Oh, there's no video for this one.
Sorry, I missed one.
Yeah. So the future of architecture, looking at it in terms of like the metaverse. So there's the future of architecture in terms of equity, like in places like Wakanda, and then there's the future of architecture in terms of the metaverse in bringing people of different backgrounds and different types of the world coming together to create a future. So as you saw, Patrick speaking about it and a bunch of folks in that video, there's already towns and cities that are built. This was Robert Doyle's virtual world, and he made over $100,000 in just creating this world. And I think this is like democratizing architecture. When you look at the average salary of an architect in London versus in New York versus in Mumbai, drastically different. But when you design in the metaverse, there's no pay scales that disproportionately are positioned to benefit those in the West. So I thought that was really cool that like some kid in the basement in South Africa can sort of put out their version of what they believe the world to be out there and be compensated and create as much value as someone else in New York City. So I think it sort of brings that level of equity and that level of drive. Now, are there still challenges within this particular way of looking at architecture? Of course they are. I think people in New York versus people in Mumbai or people in Kenya, there's still a disproportionate, there's still a huge lack of resources. So someone in New York may be able to enter into the metaverse market a lot easier than someone in South Africa, right? So I think the next stage within the evolution and the creation of the metaverse is how do we democratize access to the metaverse, because it will only truly yield the benefits that I am speaking about today if everyone has equitable access to it. So my next prediction is the future of architecture is mental or local. So 1 in 5 adult Americans struggle with mental health, and it's such a huge problem within our society, especially with the growing virtual age and social media and different things. There's huge growth in stats for suicide and all of these different things. We are more connected today than we've ever been before with social media, and yet we are also more alone today than we've ever been. So it's a very fascinating contrast there. And what's the role of architecture? I think Churchill put it best when he said, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And I think that's why I started with this idea of the metaverse helping us all reimagine what architecture could be versus what architecture has been. So when you look at your apartment right now that you live in, it is probably designed in a style that's been around for over 500 years, which is not a problem. It means that style and that way of building has worked and has been developed over time. But the bigger question is, does that style, that way of building serve us today? Was it designed for someone who spends 5 hours on Instagram a day? Right? How do we design new buildings that meets the demands of our mental health issues today, of our struggles as a society today? So the next generation of architects will invest more into designing spaces and places that help us cope and heal from our mental health and trauma, from using different materials and colors to help us heal. It will also be an architecture of healing from racial wounds and bridging gaps in our socio-economic disparities. And I think that's why I love looking at Gen Zs and millennials. We take the ideas of mental health a lot more seriously than previous generations, but also we take the ideas around equity and creating equitable access to spaces and places more seriously. And I think that the future of architecture will be us responding to our very modern challenges and creating spaces and places that are colorful, that make us feel a particular way, right? So this ranges from the type of materials that you use, so like warm materials and wood, the sizes of windows that you have in different spaces, bringing in nature, sort of creating these indoor-outdoor spaces, bringing nature into buildings, whether through skylights or different ways of incorporating nature within buildings. All of these things add up into designing spaces that are good for mental health. And you can learn a lot about designing spaces that are good for mental health if you study color theory and understand how different colors make us feel and how we react to different spaces and places. I really love this quote by Eliam de Botton when it says, "We need a home in the psychological sense as much as we need one in the physical. To compensate for vulnerability, we need a refuge to shore up our states of mind, because so much of the world is opposed to our allegiance. We need our rooms to align us to the desirable versions of ourselves and to keep alive the important and ever-sent sides of us." And I think that's what buildings are supposed to do. So this is a project by Origin and OHY Peckerville, which I think was really cool when you look at how they use the different lights, the soft materials and wood. There's even mental health spaces where people can take time out and go there and rest. So how does architecture start facilitating healing? Can you please play the video? The future of architecture is ganja. This is my last prediction, guys. Bear with me.
What I love about building with these blocks is it's like Lego for adults. That's what everybody can relate to. Hempcrete is a great insulator. It's fire resistant. It's easy to build with, and it's good for the environment. So our mix is comprised of hemp hurd, which is the inner core of the hemp plant, and we mix that with lime. The reason we developed this modular building block was to make it easier to work with hempcrete and easier to integrate hempcrete into current building standards. My brother's the one who invented the product, and Mac helped somebody do a hemp build that was in situ, meaning you tap it in place on site, and it was taking an extraordinarily long amount of time, and they had to wait for it to dry as well. So he was thinking there's got to be a better way. We love hempcrete, but it has to be something that's easy for builders to use to make it practical for a building product. So that's kind of why we developed the block, so we can be on par or slightly more expensive than conventional building materials, but way superior as far as the performance of the building once it's done. It's hempcrete with the load-bearing capacity of high-performance concrete. So you're getting all the benefits of a concrete wall with half the weight, and the insulation values are 10 times more. It meets or exceeds the passive house standards for energy consumption. We developed the blocks to be easy to handle. They're only about 25 pounds. They stack and interlock together and makes an integral structure that becomes monolithic once they're all put together. And it's fast to work with, so there's no waiting for anything to dry. Once you stack the wall up, it's ready to go. The black frames are the heavy-duty frames, which are designed for tall wall heights of 30 feet. And the green ones are the standard duty or light-duty frames, which are designed for residential, and they're good for freestanding walls of about 20 feet. So this is the internal structure that's load-bearing and provides a structural support. This is the hemp lime matrix that we put around it for insulation. And this is a scratch coat we use so we can apply the lime plaster and the lime stucco directly on the exterior and the interior. But as you can see, it's pretty simple. It's hempen line wrapped around a structural frame. And as you can see here, we have conduit holes for electrical. Every 5.3 inches, you can run electrical conduit through here while you're putting the blocks together. There's no sand in any.
So weed is the future of materials, as you saw. Until now, only a certain number of people and certain class of people could stay in high buildings. That's why they call them high rises and all of these things. But with this material, we can all stay in high buildings. And if your building does burn down, at least you'll forget about it because of the smoke. So I think the future of architecture is Hempcrete, or building with organic living materials. And when you think about it, it's a no-brainer. If you've ever actually built yourself, I did building before I did architecture, and those bricks are heavy, very heavy. The Hempcrete is very light, almost zero carbon emission, higher insulation, faster to build, organic. It's so much better in so many different ways, and it's mind-boggling that we're not already there where we're using it more. So I really think, as Snoop would agree, the future of architecture is the ganja. And as I close out, right, there is no beauty in the finest cloth if it makes hunger and unhappiness. So there's no beauty in us using these glorified materials and all of these things if they're inaccessible and are costing us, through carbon emissions or through all of these different things. How about we rethink that and use materials that actually serve us? Thank you. I think those are my 3 predictions.
I'm so thrilled that Snoop has made it into Future Fest. That is not something I expected. Good job. I also think that you've gotten the most emoji reactions of any speaker for 3 weeks, so that's pretty impressive as well.
Appreciate y'all.
All right, so I'm zooming way back out to the city scale for prediction number 7. So I'm going to talk about something that is not architectural in itself, but will surely impact the way in which we build in fundamental ways. Driverless cars have the potential to transform the layout of our roads, of our parking lots and parking garages, and cities as a whole. For this one, picture a city in which every single vehicle is automated and connected together via the Internet of Things. In theory, every car arriving at an intersection would be able to regulate its speed and path and cross safely without the need for traffic lights. Of course, that does not take into consideration pedestrians, so maybe we need a whole new network of pedestrian routes through the city if we were to go down this route. Then there's parking. So as Audi posits, parking for driverless cars could be located underground or outside urban centers, and could be much more compact than they are currently. Automated vehicles could park themselves an inch apart from the cars on either side of them. And combined with there being no need for stairwells and elevators in these parking lots, this would allow for a 60% reduction in overall parking space in our cities. If they were to move underground or out of their current locations, that could leave a lot of very large, very empty parking garages in need of a new purpose. Kinder Baumgardner, managing principal of SWA, envisions creative new uses for these vast buildings. They could be turned into galleries, sports centers, exhibition halls, and markets. That brings me nicely to my to my 8th prediction, which is all about adaptive reuse, probably my favorite architectural typology out there. I believe that adaptive reuse projects are going to dominate the architectural industry for the next 20 years and more. As our metropolises continue to grow and densify, the need for solutions to transform old and often crumbling buildings in the heart of our cities is growing at an amazing rate. Fortunately, many firms are not only delivering projects like this on a regular basis, they are refining the process and turning it into a fine art. The first example shown here is Empire Stores in Brooklyn, New York, designed by Studio V and S9 Architecture. Empire Stores was once a series of former coffee stores, derelict brick shells on the banks of the East River. These industrial buildings have been transformed into a vibrant mixed-use hub, including restaurants, retail, and recreational space, while preserving the original materiality of the old structures. For something a little different, we have Tainan Spring in Taiwan, which used to be an abandoned shopping mall in the heart of the city. MVRDV, one of our previous FutureFest speakers, have converted it into an urban lagoon, an oasis-like public water park that brings this once empty space back to life. As the firm says, this new way of preserving heritage meant that the site was not cleared and renewed in a tabula rasa approach. Instead, the foundations of the former mall stick out of the park and lagoon like a contemporary Roman forum, offering a visual marker of the historical decision to close a port in favor of a mall. And it's not just cities where these projects are appearing. Another of my favorite adaptive reuse projects, which also won itself not one but 3 A+ awards back in 2020, is Atelier Tau C's Capsule Hotel in a rural library. What used to be a deteriorating old house constructed from wood and mud walls has been rejuvenated with the careful insertion of capsule accommodations and a community bookstore. The introduction of full-height polycarbonate addition allows light deep into the interior while also connecting the building's inhabitants with the surrounding mountains. I just love these interiors. If we have time, I think we do, I'm going to play a quick bonus video, which is another adaptive reuse project that won an A+ award a few years ago, but I think is still relevant today.
The silo is not only just another housing project. It is really a project which is speaking about the transformation of our cities from industrial cities to more livable cities. It's a post-industrial monument. It's big concrete corn silo, and many people didn't see any potentials in that building. But we had a very strong belief that we should keep the soul and the character of the silo, and we wanted to preserve the building as much, but give it a new three-dimensional skin, like a really super cool jacket. And the jacket is out of hot galvanized steel, which is having a beautiful patinating characteristic, and it really reacts to its context, the weather, the reflections of the water. So it's a very adaptable facade. You have to imagine that all the elements you see are uniquely built and are adapting a building which is actually having a three-dimensional curve. And each level is having a unique height. And I think that really helped us to create fantastic housing topologies. We cut out 30 kilometers of concrete to make a lot of openings. And then we placed the windows on the outside. So when you stand on the inside, you have a frameless window. We have been very true to a set of rules about distinguishing the existing building from all the new elements we have added to the building. What I really love with the silo is it's not only a housing project. It is a building which is opening up towards the city and is inviting the city towards itself through the gallery space in the ground level, where you can get inside and actually see the old structure of the silo. And we have a floating glass box on top, which is a restaurant and a public terrace. This year, the silo received the Project of the Year A+ award, and we're very happy for that. We have to be even better in fighting for existing building structures. We want to guide ourselves to more sustainable cities. With good design, you can inhabit the resources already used by keeping it and creating a new value for the future.
Love that one so much. That was from 4 years ago, but still, I think it's the future, even now. Okay, and then on to my final prediction, number 9. I'm zooming all the way into materials again. And instead of picking another high-tech or newly emerging material, I decided to go full circle back to basics. So on day 6 of Future Fest, the brilliant Michael Green said something that really stuck with me. He said there was an irony in developing countries adopting modern construction materials from developed countries like concrete, steel, and glass, when in fact it should be the other way around. With our climate crisis in full swing and the need for carbon emissions to be urgently reduced, Michael and others are advocating for the use of locally sourced traditional materials, as well as the use of recycled and salvage materials as much as possible. Now, the great news is that there are many architects doing just this already without sacrificing innovative design. In fact, they're reimagining classic vernacular architecture in extraordinary ways. There are so many incredible examples of this in action, but I've decided to select just one to conclude with, which is a project I never tire of seeing. Gallery House by Ebin Design Studio was designed to serve the local community of Bansberia, West Bengal. The building took cues from Bengal's terracotta temples. First, reclaimed ceramic bricks, originally rejected by factories during industrial production, were collected, and similarly, terracotta bricks were procured from a riverside brick field located nearby. These two materials were combined with the help of a local ceramic artist to build this unique textured masonry. Inspired by the way the building was coming up, the client decided to let go of his initial requirement of a garage on the ground floor and embrace the suggestions of repurposing that floor as a community hall. Every year, this locality holds a festive procession along the narrow, winding neighborhood lanes as part of a cultural celebration. Reciprocating this, the building steps down towards the street, forming a gallery for onlookers to sit who gather at the street side during this event. The integral space of the building was shared with the neighborhood people as a humane gesture of giving back to the local community without disrupting the privacy of the inner functions. Now, this might not be the most space age, sci-fi, cutting edge building to finish on, certainly not the most futuristic we've seen over the past 3 weeks, but I personally would be very happy if more future architecture looks something like this. And with that, that's our 9th prediction, and the floor is open to find our 10th prediction. That comes from you guys. Back over to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Paul and Wandile. This was very enjoyable. I don't think our chat section has ever been so lively. And yeah, you guys both touched on things that I was thinking of when I was kind of mentally thinking of my own predictions. So it was really fun to see where you guys were both coming from and to see the images that you have. We have roughly 10 minutes left, and I'm going to try to pull a couple of the questions out of the question box to pose to you both in our last few. I've also chosen a few of my favorite predictions from the chat. But before doing so, I just wanted to point out we have a poll up in the poll tab, which you'll find in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, just below your chat. So if people are interested in finding out more about the A+ awards, potentially receiving a submission guide, you guys can just head over to that polls, and by filling out the poll in that tab, you'll be able to kind of sign up your email and get information from us. So just before I head to the questions, I have a few of my favorite picked out from the audience. We had Robert Sun, who said that he thinks the future of architecture will likely see AI permeate more areas of architecture, from design processes to building functions. And that's definitely something, I mean, even in the past week, that's just exploded, I think, as a conversation in my inbox with people emailing me. And in my conversations with friends about creativity and AI, and kind of using it as an inspiration tool, but also as a tool for kind of doing calculations for architects. So that's a really like practical, good one, I think. Then we also had Peter, who said he would like to see more, or that he thinks we'll see more utilization of bamboo as a sustainable building material, and that currently we have like research lacking. I completely agree, and it's just crazy when you read the specs about the structural potential of bamboo, and I certainly hope that the future of architecture is exploring structural uses of bamboo and also new ways of using it. So that's a really great one. And then we also had someone who kind of made us very kind of succinct description of different ideas that have been brought up over the past 3 weeks in Future Fest. So Dimitra says, definitely sustainable architecture, but in order to include and solve all the problems discussed in the sessions in the past 3 weeks, here are some things that should be done. The road network should be underground, land above should be harvested, and buildings should clean the air with CO2. And this is a mix of projects that Dimitra saw at Future Fest. I couldn't agree more, and I hope that we see, my personal prediction is that I hope that we as citizens start to take back the streets from cars and find new pedestrian-centric ways of reclaiming our cities, including parks like we've seen in Dallas, taking back parking lots and also taking back parking garages. I've seen some cool projects in architecture for ways that we can create people-centered parking garages with basketball courts and green parks. So without further ado, I'm going to head over to the questions box to choose the first question. And we have a very practical question from Sue Littles, who asks about House Zero. So Paul, maybe you, Wandile, I'm not sure if you also have thoughts on this, but she asks, back to House Zero, do you think 3D printed exterior walls would survive winter snow environment, freeze thaw cycles, and how would they kind of hold up in more northern climates? And I thought this was an interesting question because I've also seen 3D printed architecture in more southern projects as well. So I don't know if either of you have come across its uses up north.
I think that's a really great question. And it's definitely, it's difficult for me to dive into the technical details of this. However, just from what I've seen firms developing, it does seem like these projects have started to be developed a lot more in the South, so especially in Texas, by the looks of it, which might indicate that more work is needed to figure out details that can work in different climates. I can imagine there being issues with expansion and contraction in cold weather with some of these designs. But I think the exciting thing about 3D printing is the more that these firms are experimenting with it, the more kind of complex and kind of detail-oriented they're becoming. So I could imagine a future in which we can print 3D tiled facades that are able to shift and move potentially, and even be combining them with rain screens, and which could also be, I guess, 3D printed in a completely different material. And maybe there are a kind of a multi-layered envelope that can be developed, but still utilizing this kind of super efficient construction technique. So, I think we're still in the early days, even though, we saw back in 2017, we were talking about it. It's going to take a little while longer, but I think more and more clients are interested in these new technologies, and where there's money, there will be innovation. So I think hopefully, there will be a supply and demand, and there will be these firms like SOM yesterday talking about algae skyscrapers. This isn't something that a few years ago would have been marketable. It's not something that clients would have paid for, but now maybe in the future, as everybody becomes more eco-conscious, they'll go for that. And probably the same thing with 3D printing.
Thanks, Paul. And Wandile, I don't know if you have any thoughts on 3D printing or would like to speak to that, maybe not even in northern climates, but just in general as a future of architecture point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I am at like and 50-50 on it, like because I've been eyeing 3D printing for a while for particularly social housing, you know, and I don't know, since 2012 I've been hearing the promise of 3D printing, right? And it just hasn't happened, you know, at least at the scale. So I'm a little wary as like why is it taking so long for it to actually break? What are the challenges? Is it too slow to build? Does it end up costing more? Because again, obviously in my sector, it's always like, how can this be cost effective? So I haven't quite found it to work in that, but I hope it does, you know. So that's kind of.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's the same with any high tech, right? It's like anything that's very high tech also breaks a lot more, a lot more easily. So, you know, your Apple products, like if it breaks, you're kind of stuck. I feel like it's the same thing. If you're going to rely on the most advanced robot in the world to build your house, then you might come unstuck versus, just good old fashioned bricklaying. So, I think, yeah, until there are safeguards in place and backup options and, various kind of ways to make this a little bit more, a little less sensitive, I guess, a little more practical, then yeah, it may take a little while still.
I think that's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way. Yeah, because it's like, even if you build it right, and then your house, like something breaks in Ubuntu, like the cost of replacing that, is the cost of replacing a whole brick wall, right? So it's just not quite cost effective yet for mass housing and social housing. So that's the thing. Yeah. It's almost similar to, I view it the same way we viewed container. You remember when container houses were coming out? I was like, oh my, this is the future. This is what's going to solve social housing, etc. X amount of years later, it's like, maybe not, right? So that's kind of where.
We have no shortage of ideas, I think, in the architecture community. I think it's just needing to convince people to invest in them. And Architizer is doing so many things. And I want to see so many more of these ideas that I hear about and that I see every day when I'm at Architizer come to fruition and receive funding to do so. We're kind of hitting our time here. So I don't know if we're going to have another time for another question. I want to instead just take a moment and thank everyone for being so active in this chat. We had Reda say that that guests can continue chatting on Architizer's Facebook page, and I wholeheartely agree. Thank you. Reda also said you guys rock, to use a popular music term, which was funny. So I am really hoping that we continue the conversation. I want to remind everyone that all of our different talks are going to remain available for at least the foreseeable future. So you guys can go to that link that was dropped in this chat. We'll try to drop it again. The chat will remain live for a bit after we finish the event. And you guys can feel free to yes, also find Wandile on Instagram. He is a great follow. I am very glad I didn't follow him on Instagram. And he also has LinkedIn and Facebook. So yeah, would love to continue hearing from everyone. Stay tuned for more live events like this. And thank you so much. Don't forget to fill out the poll if you're interested in A+. All the best.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you soon at upcoming events. And thank you so much, Wandile, for more inspirational ideas, as always. I think Wandile is frozen.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.